Jeremy Bowers is the Global Chief Technology Officer at Politico, the dominant source for news on politics and policy in power centers across every continent, where he manages the worldwide tech organization. Prior to Politico, Jeremy served in technical leadership positions at the Washington Post, New York Times, and NPR. I think we all know those small little news outlets. Jeremy, we are so ready to talk with you about the convergence of AI with news and politics and trusted customer experiences.
Awesome. Thank you, Lauren. It's really great to be here today.
So first, let's set the stage with some context on Politico. Talk about your mission and talk about your audience.
That's right. You know, Politico is, I think, unique among media companies, probably not in our focus, right? We're focused on politics, policy, and power, which we share with a few other folks. But we are not a general purpose news organization like the Washington Post or the New York Times. We have this real focus on the mechanics of lawmaking and the people who are pulling on those levers. And so this really is a unique audience for us. And it means that it's an opportunity for us to get to learn and know more about that audience, certainly at a much deeper level than I feel like I was able to do at more general purpose news organizations. We just have this wealth of understanding, especially about the Politico Pro customers, that I think really helps us understand and refine, like when we go to build features or when we go to ship new products. It makes it so much easier for us, that depth of understanding about how people need our tools and what they need to do every day.
Congress people, senators, the West Wing, right? Like a pretty cool audience. So you got to hear Amy just at the tail end of her session talking about levels of personalization, and knowing that you have such vast first-party data for some of your subscribers. Give us your take on personalization for a political news site.
Oh, absolutely. You know, this is, we think about, when we want to personalize some of the products that we have for our customers, we think about this as sort of a sliding scale, right? For the customers we know the most about, our Politico Pro subscribers, our, folks who have been a long time with us and they use our tools every day. We have this like real depth of knowledge about those folks. And so we have a real opportunity to sort of personalize the products that they see. When you log into the Politico Pro dashboard, if you work for a Fortune 500 company and you are in compliance, or if you work as a chief of staff for a lawmaker, those tools are nearly laser guided into the things that you want to do every day. So we have, tooling that makes it easier for you to get in touch with people who work at other companies. It makes it easier for you to get in touch with a lawmaker. They help you understand what's happening in tracking a piece of legislation as it like goes through, the floor of the House or the Senate, right? And so that's a level of personalization we just could not approach when I worked at the Times or at the Post, because we just didn't have that sort of depth of understanding. But we're really only talking about a few thousand people that we have that kind of depth of understanding for, right? It's not the entire United States. And most people, myself included, are not tracking legislation every day, right? Even people who really keep up with US politics. And so let's think about that sort of core group of, Politico Pro users as folks who we have so much understanding of that we can target, we can really personalize, down to the nth degree. Then in that sliding scale, we sort of slide back one level. It's a broader group of folks, but these are people who, visit Politico maybe 10, 12, 15 times a month. They're reading our stories. They probably subscribe to a newsletter, which is one of our sort of biggest platforms that we have for reaching folks. And they're keeping up with the news of the day. They are probably thinking about legislation, just not in, as much depth. They might be thinking about regulation. They might be thinking about how the political process affects their business, right? But they're not, personally tracking a piece of legislation. They're not going to today reach out to a congressperson to ask them questions, right? So this group of people is, much, much broader, in the tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands of people. And though that group, we can be a little more personalized, right? Like we can target a newsletter to maybe something that you're really interested in. We can push you towards our environmental coverage if we know that that's an area that you're sort of watching, or towards energy or technology technology regulation if we know that that's where you're looking. But we still have room to grow even here. We have a new mobile app that we've been working on. One of the things that we're working on for the next handful of quarters is how can we make that mobile app experience similar to what it feels like if you are a reader of a newsletter or if you're a reader of our website. Then the broadest group of customers, if we want to zoom level out one more time, this is people who are maybe occasional visitors. They come for the big breaking news stories that Politico writes. They're probably, clicking on a link on social, or maybe they've been sent something by a friend, or they see our name on a television show and they, type it into a search engine, right? And so that extremely broad group of folks, there's not a whole lot that we can do for them, but we are trying through more first-party data sort of collection efforts, like things like light registration walls, some other things like that, where we can sort of offer some value back to a consumer who's even just very occasional to the site, finding ways to really give them something in exchange. If they've got information that we need, if we would like to learn more about them, we want that to be a two-way street, where we can provide them something of value, sort of in exchange. That's sort of how we think about it at Politico on that sliding scale. And I will say it is nice to have that really deep zoom level at the very front, where we have those folks who we just know so much about. Like that, I have to say, it's nothing like any place I've ever worked before.
Yeah, you all do that so well. And you shared with me a really interesting use case. Looking at insights from your first party data, you identified a challenge that a lot of your audience was facing, and you were able to step in and solve that. So tell us about that.
This is one of those cases where, when we see our audience, and we can watch them using our tooling, we can see where they start to bump up against, what we've built, and places where we can sort of understand that they need additional help, right? And this is a great use case, right? Because it came about first, we observed it on the site. We saw folks trying to track down multiple email addresses, and we couldn't figure out why. Why is all of this behavior on, emailing an entire group of people in like 5 or 10 seconds, and then a long wait, and then emailing another group of people in another 5 to 10 seconds, right? This was like a really odd user behavior. And so we spent some time, talking to some our trusted partners, folks who've been like longtime subscribers to Politico Pro. We figured out that there is this bit of tooling that's like really important to people, which is the ability to sort of collect and then email, say, a group of people who are all on a committee together, or a group of people who are considering a piece of legislation, or even, a group that are might want to hear a message from somebody who needs to get in touch with them, about something in politics, right? So our platform now offers some tooling that makes it so much easier to do this. It's practically like a CRM, but for political folks, right? And this is something that Politico has. We've always had contact information for various offices. We've always had the ability to get in touch with lawmakers, but we've never really exposed that to consumers before. And so this is like an interesting way where we can say, okay, we can take something that Politico has and knows, and we can connect it with your needs, and we can build a product that like makes you, that much more likely to use Politico Pro as your, well, this is the way I'm going to contact lawmakers. This is an easy way for me to track and understand what the rest of my team has been doing. And then it makes it so much easier to do message targeting and other things like this. I honestly don't know how you would do it otherwise. Like, it just sounds like a really difficult problem. And I'm super glad that we were able to like ship that feature for folks.
Yeah, that's a huge value add, and I'm sure creates a ton of stickiness for Politico as an organization. So that's an awesome use case for sure. When we spoke earlier, I mentioned generative AI, and Jeremy's going like this. He's super passionate to get to talk about that. So there's so much excitement, obviously, happening out in the world around generative AI, the good, the bad. I want to hear your perspective on it.
Yes, absolutely. In Politico, we're a place that, we hold a lot of journalism ethics fairly close to our heart, right? And this sort of constrains a lot of the use cases for generative AI that make sense for other organizations. Content generation, for example, is something that we're never going to be able to do with generative AI because we have piles of reporters and they're very good at their jobs, right? So this is one of those cases where we looked at generative AI. We saw that it was something, very interesting with the potential to disrupt and transform our business. And so we thought, how can we harness that in ways that are useful and that meet our mission, but without going, in ways that are sort of orthogonal to how we want to do our business every day, right? And so this is an age-old problem in technology. You have a core business that got you to where you are today, right? This business is mature, it is strong. You spend a lot of time like basically keeping that working, but that's not the place where your business will fail, right? Like your business will fail at the edges. You'll be disrupted by someone in the periphery. And so you have that core versus periphery problem that's so difficult, because how do you take engineers and tell them, look, don't work on our core business anymore. Come over here and work on something that is off to the side, that like has maybe very little benefit to the company initially, but it's the place where we're likely to get disrupted or transformed from the outside, right? Like this is a very difficult balancing act. And I won't lie, it's not something that we have completely figured out. I mentioned this to you earlier. I really feel like it's more art than science. And so, at Politico, we've taken a few steps towards looking at ways that we can use generative AI in our existing workflows, right? Like one of the things that we're looking at is smart assistants, right? We have people at the company who have, manual labor in their jobs where they have to type in, a bunch of information, or they have to make sense very quickly of a large document set. Maybe they have to summarize a pile of emails, or, find a time for a meeting on a series of calendars, right? These are things where an AI assistant would be really useful. It would make someone's life a lot easier. It makes their job something that they can do a little more effectively and efficiently. So that's like the first pile of things that we started looking at. It's like, how can we make people at the company more effective at the things they already do? So in that way, we were thinking of generative AI more of an exoskeleton than a robot, right? If you jump really high, we want to make you jump even higher. If you lift heavy things, we want to help you lift even heavier things, right? But we're not replacing people with AI, especially not in that regard. Right. There's a second area where we've really been thinking too, which is not just internal tooling, but things that we can have that are consumer facing. And for this, our eyes have turned to places like Google or Microsoft, where they're using generative AI to help make sense of large document sets, or complex tricky legal filings, other things like that. Now, the area that we've sort of found that this is difficult for is that most of these large language models that we're looking at were trained, on the general corpus of the internet. They were trained on Reddit posts and Google searches and, blog posts that people have long since forgotten about, but they're in, I would say, like pretty standard English language writing. There are other languages, of course, that they've pulled in, but not very much technical detail, right? And so one of the areas that we found the LLMs fall short for us is on, say, analyzing legislation, or taking a look at a piece of regulation and trying to summarize its impact on a business, right? Because these use such technical language that it's really difficult, that a general purpose AI would not have the expertise that you need. And so this is an area where we're spending a significant amount of time trying to find ways essentially to make this easier and better for our reporters who are doing this analysis. Can we ask an AI to help us summarize a stack of documents? Can we ask it to help us find what's interesting in this pile? I mean, anything that we can do essentially to make our reporters faster and more efficient are going to be things that we're looking for.
That's awesome. You have some really interesting use cases for AI as well, being at Politico. So it's fascinating to, kind of hear what's going on behind the scenes there. As the CTO at Politico, what advice would you give to the audience today in terms of future-proofing your business, maybe based on the way that you're looking at it?
Absolutely. I would say the first and the biggest thing is to get your feet wet. Technologies like this, when we talk about them in the abstract, they can seem interesting or scary or all of the above, right? We talk about them all the time, like a Rorschach test, an ink blot. When you look at the ink blot, some people see, a knife, and some people see a lamp, right? And so it really depends on what you had, in your head when you looked at it for the first time. So I find generative AI to be among these things where it has vastly different sort of conceptions by different people who look at it, right? So that's my first thing. Try it out. Get your feet wet. Take a look at ChatGPT GPT-3 or ChatGPT-4, play around with some of these sort of web-facing large language models. Ask them some questions, paste in the text of some unimportant things and ask it to summarize it for you. You'll start to get a real understanding of places where those large language models can be valuable and places where they really kind of fall short every day, right? So that's the first thing, get the feedback. The second thing I would say is in this sort of core versus periphery distinction that I was mentioning earlier, you're going to have an opportunity to sort of back some real like innovation from somewhere in your company. You're going to have an engineer somewhere who has come up with an interesting idea and wants to show it off, or you're going to have someone in your sales or marketing team that have a prototype that they'd like to try out. And what I would say to you as a leader is this is your opportunity to really give people an opportunity to shine, right? These prototypes are not going to be the thing that solves your business, but it will be an interesting learning opportunity, and it'll be good practice for you to try out things at the periphery that are away from your core. Lauren, when you and I talked about this earlier, I said, my teams love to do moonshots, right? We like to build a rocket and try to shoot it at the moon, because even if you don't get all the way to the moon, sometimes you get, the microwave oven or astronaut ice cream or something like that, right? And similarly, I would say to you, if you're a leader and you're looking at how do I sort of engage innovation, right? You want to give yourself opportunities to try things, because even if you don't get your big hairy goal, maybe you'll get something intermediate along the way, and you'll definitely get more practice in trying out things that are outside of your core competencies.
I love that. I love space ice cream. So great metaphor.
Wonderful.
Jeremy, it's been an honor. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for trusting Telium to help power your super data-driven customer experiences. It's fascinating to get to hear about that. So everyone, join me in thanking Jeremy.